Welcome to this PD On Demand module entitled Student-Teacher Relationships. Here are the learning targets for this module. Define student-teacher relationships. Identify the rationale for establishing student-teacher relationships. Identify strategies to foster student-teacher relationships in your classroom. Hattie says effect sizes are the best way of answering the question, what has the greatest influence on student learning? Student-teacher relationships has an effect size of 0.52, which is in the zone of desired effects. Anything above a 0.4 has a positive impact on learning. Teachers need to have a positive interpersonal relationship with each student, and students need to feel the classroom environment is trustworthy, fair, and empathetic. One important thing to note is that when we discuss relationships, that it is more than educators getting to know their students, but also students getting to know their teachers. This relationship must be reciprocated. Pause the training here and watch the video entitled Every Opportunity. At the conclusion of the video, reflect on or discuss the following question with your team or staff. Do we consider every opportunity we have to make an impact on children's lives? Students' brains are hard at work every moment of the day, learning skills and connecting new information with old. Those same brains are also constantly processing information when it comes to their relationship with you, their teacher. Positive student relationships are fundamental to success. When students feel supported, they're more likely to engage in learning and have better academic outcomes. Plus, when students have positive interactions with teachers, they have fewer behavioral problems. These relationships are more important and more challenging than ever in uncertain times, like during the coronavirus pandemic. Building relationships with students promotes a positive learning environment, helps to build our classroom community, and is probably one of the best investments we can make with our students. When we seek to understand, we show our students that we care. Attempting to understand our students is not a simple process because every child is a unique individual. When we take the time to ask questions and listen, we have a good chance of understanding our students even better. This sounds really simple, but it's not always as easy as it sounds. We've all experienced situations where students are upset, emotional, or even defiant. When I'm trying to understand a student who is in one of these emotional states, my first question always is, are you okay? It's amazing how much a child will open up once we show them that we care. Some of the most current research indicates that we should foster and cultivate relationships between teachers and students. A review of educational research analysis of 46 studies found that a strong teacher-student relationship were associated in both the short and long term with improvements on practically every measure schools care about: higher student academic engagement, attendance, grades, fewer disruptive behaviors and suspensions, and lower school dropout rates. Those effects were strong even after controlling for differences in students' individual, family, and school backgrounds. Research indicates that fostering relationships in the classroom benefits students, but did you know that it also benefits teachers? A study in the European Journal of Psychology of Education found that a teacher's relationship with students was the best predictor of how much the teacher experienced joy versus anxiety in class. Whether we are teaching in a face-to-face or virtual environment, these tips can help foster relationships with students. Both providing classroom structure and creating a safe and secure environment have to do with your routines and procedures in your classroom. Do you have procedures set up in your class so that all students know what's expected? And do you practice those procedures on a regular basis, giving feedback to students on how they're doing with those procedures? Do we demonstrate mutual trust with our students and respect? How can we show an interest in students' lives outside the classroom? Do we ask how students did over the weekend, or how their brothers or sisters are doing, or just checking in with them on their outside curricular activities from school? And are we really using active listening, or are we listening to students just to form a response? Do we listen to really listen to what students are saying? The next few slides describe strategies that can be utilized in order to foster student-teacher relationships. Links to these examples can be found in the informational box below this video on our YouTube channel. These strategies include learning students' names as soon as possible. For some of us that teach middle school and/or high school, that's a tough order when we have 140, 150 kids on our roster, but it's really, really important that we try to learn those names at least within the first week of school, or at least the first 2 weeks of school. How do we greet students at the door? Do we have positive verbal greetings, or do we have a handshake or a gesture that we use with students? How do we call on students equitably? Do we have a whip around procedure? Do we use a random name generator? Do we use popsicle sticks so that we're making sure that we're calling on students very equitably and we're not calling on the same students time after time after time? Here are 2 more strategies. Using student interest inventories. Do we inventory our students at the beginning of the year or beginning of the grading period to see what they're interested in? Results of those inventories can be used when lesson planning to really reach students where they are and give them something to be interested in our classrooms. We also talk about the 2x10 strategy. This is a strategy that you use with a student where you take 2 minutes a day for 10 days in a row to just check in with that student. During that time, you don't discuss anything academic or anything related to school. It's just a check-in with that student. So you check in for 2 minutes for 10 days in a row. That's a strategy that can be used to get to know students, and it can also be used if students are having some behavioral issues in your class. Pause this video here to reflect on what strategies you currently use. If you are viewing this webinar with your team or staff, you can take a few minutes to share these practices with one another. In the current context of physical distancing, personal protective equipment, and remote learning, it may seem harder to connect. Masks will hide smiles and other positive expressions, and our need to maintain space may inadvertently send messages of stay away instead of welcome. If we are teaching remotely, this distance can really seem far apart. We need to be more intentional with establishing positive connections. As we cannot rely on expressions or physical touch, we need to consider how to use our words more fully to convey the meaning of our welcome, connections, and positive feedback. This information from the Center on PBIS illustrates some ways to stay connected to students during times of physical distance. Take a moment to read the examples on the slide. Choose at least one that you will commit to using in the next few days. Now that you have reflected on strategies you currently use and hopefully have learned some new ones, what is the next step? Here are 2 tools that you can use to strengthen the environment and relationships in your classroom. The Classroom Management Self-Assessment is an assessment that helps determine which effective general classroom management practices are in place and develops an action plan for enhancement based on this information. The second one is the Equitable Classroom Practices Observation Checklist. It is a checklist of 27 specific observable teacher behaviors that reflects culturally responsive teaching through examples. This tool can become more aware of incorporating equitable practices into your teaching routine. Both of these tools support practices that improve relationships in the classroom. In summary, many qualities define a positive relationship and pave ways on how to create powerful student-teacher relationships. These can be seen to include good communication, a safe learning environment, and mutual respect, a positive and patient attitude, student equality, and timely praise. Thank you for viewing this module. Please check out other modules for evidence-based practices. Also check us out on our Twitter at Ohio State Support Team Region 8 and our YouTube channel at State Support Team 8.